Hey guys, welcome back. In this lecture, we're gonna discuss about how to manage environment variables into your Rails application, or how many ways there are to manage environment variables into your Rails application. But before knowing the ways, let's discuss what are environment variables and what is its importance. So the environment variables can be used as configuration options or secret data that you want to use in your application to perform desired behaviors, but at the same time you want to keep those variables or data hidden from outer world. Okay, so some example can be like this. For example, if you have an application where you are processing some payments through the Stripe, then you have to store Stripe public keys and Stripe secret keys in your application, but you just want to use those keys, but you don't want to make them publicly available in your code. So you can use environment variables to handle those keys. Okay, and sometimes if you want to send real emails or send the emails into the inbox of the real email users, then you might need your Google email and password, or your SendGrid email and password, or whatever email service provider you are using. So you might need email and password to store in your application. But if you use them in environment variable, then they are safer. If you push that email and password along with code base, then it is not a good practice. So you need to handle them using environment variables. And another example can be like managing third party API keys like Google Map keys, Google client secret and client ID, which require to authenticate from Google when we use OmniAuth. Okay, so these are just few example. You can hide any kind of configuration or sensitive data using environment variables into your Rails application. Okay, now let's discuss how many ways there are to use environment variables into a Rails application. Okay, so we can handle environment variables using two ways here. First, we can use some gems to handle environment variables like figaro and .env rails. Okay, and the other way is rails credentials.yml. Okay, so this is the file which is provided when you generate a new Rails application, and the file name is credentials.yml.enc, and you can find that file inside the config directory of your root project folder. Okay, yeah, but just need to make sure that you will only get this credentials.yml.enc if you are working with Rails 5.2 or higher. If you are working with any lower version than Rails 5.2, then you will not get this file, and instead there you will find a file that is secret.yml, and you can handle your secret variables there. Okay, but we will not discuss about that because that is completely outdated Rails version. And if you have any doubt with Rails 5.1 or later older versions, you can ping me through comment section. But in this lecture we will mainly focus on managing environment variables using figaro and .env gems and the Rails credentials.yml. Okay, now let's start with that. But here I'm considering that you already have a Rails application. Okay, so we will practice these gems like figaro and .env in our application. Okay, so now open your gem file and add .env rails, because first we will go with the .env rails. Okay, so open your gem file. Now, as I said that I'm considering that you have a Rails application already. Okay, so we will do that in existing applications. So in let's open the gem file, and inside the gem file, go to the development test group, and here you can use the gem dot env and Rails. Okay, just save this line and run the bundle install. Okay, now you can see that bundle install has worked. Okay, so now after installing the bundle, you need to create a file into your project folder and name this file as .env. Okay, so open your project folder, and at the root of the project folder you need to create a file, and just save this file by name .env. Okay, and save this file. Yeah, just go for the use. Okay, and now you can define your environment variable in this file. Okay, for example, you can define something like base URL, and then in double quotes just provide the value for this. Here you can provide https example.com. Okay, now just you need to save this. Now to access this environment variable, you need to open the Rails console and try to access this environment variable like this. So come to the Rails console and then, sorry, come to the terminal and okay. So here you can see that our variable name is base URL. Okay. So how we can access this? Like env and then provide in single quotes or double quotes base URL. Okay. So here you can see that we can get the value of this variable, and just like this you can handle any kind of environment variable here. For example, let's say describe public key, publishable key. Okay, and just provide some random string here. Okay, and now try to access this variable, but you will get nil right now. Will not get value of this. Why? Because when you need to keep this thing in mind that whenever you add a new environment variable into your .env file, then you have to either restart your Rails server or restart your Rails console. Okay, so let's restart it, exit, and then restart the console again. Sorry. Now if you access this env stripe publishable key now, then you will get the value of it. Okay, so it's still nil. Okay, sorry, I did not save this file, so let's restart it again. Now you can see the value of this stripe publishable key. Here you can see that we have the value of this key now. Okay, so this is how .env file works. Okay, so what you need to do, that first add the .env gem into your gem file. Make sure that you added this gem into the development and test group, and then run the bundle install. And after installing the bundle, add .env file in your Rails application, and then in .env file you can start adding your environment variables. And this is how you can access your variables, like use env and then inside as an array string pass the variable name, and you will get the value of that environment variable. Okay, but here you need to make sure that you have added this .env file into .gitignore file. Okay, because this is supposed to be a good practice, that no, you should not push your environment variables along with your code. Okay, so keep this thing in mind and you will be safe to manage your environment variables using .env rails gem. Okay, so what we need to do here, that you can see that right now this .env file is publicly available. So open the gitignore file and you can add the .env file here and save this. Okay, because when you add this .env file, you will avoid this env file from uh, this env file to pushing on the GitHub or your code repository along with the code. Okay, because it is not a good practice to push that environment variables. Okay, so we saw how the .env rails gem work. Now it's time to see how figaro gem will work. Okay, so to add the figaro gem, just open your gem file, and inside the development and test group you can add gem figaro and save this and exit the Rails console and run the bundle install. Okay, once the bundle install has been run, so just like .env file, you need to create a file, but not inside the root project directory. You need to create the file inside the config directory and name that file as application.yml. So create file application.yml and save this file. Okay, and here you can define your environment variables. Okay, so let's say we can add environment variable here, like let's say figaro base URL. Okay, and since this is a YAML file, so you need to add a value like key value pair. Okay, so key must be a capital or a small letter string. Okay, all letter can be capital or small, and then you need to separate it by colon symbol, and then you can provide value of its. And here you don't need to store your value inside the string. Okay, if you provide value directly, it will be considered as the string only. Okay, so here you can provide https figaro dot example dot com. Okay, save this file, and now open the, and here you can access this environment variable like env, and here you can just copy this variable and paste it inside the env, and you will get the value of it. https figaro.example.com. Okay, so this is how you can manage your environment variables using figaro gem. Okay, so we saw managing environment variables using two gems, .env gem and the figaro gem. Both are simple ways and both are good ways to handle your environment variables if you are not familiar with rails credentials, or and if you want to use ruby gems to handle environment variables for your rails application. Also, just like .env version, try to add, not try to add, at least you need to add this application.yml into the git ignore. Okay, so just open this git ignore and you need to add it here, config, and then application.yml, and save this. Okay, because just as we discussed for the .env file, it is not a good practice to send your application.yml if it has environment variables in your application. Okay, so what is the difference between .env gem and figaro gem? That with .env gem you need to create a file to handle environment variables with name .env. Okay, and with figaro gem you need to create a file application.yml inside the config directory to handle the environment variables. Okay, and whenever you add a new environment variable, or you change the value of an existing environment variable, you need to either restart your rails server or rails console, or wherever you are performing your logic, or you are trying to access the environment variable. Okay, now it's time to discuss the third way for managing your environment variables, and that is managing using rails credentials.yml. Okay, so in the config folder you can see that I have a file credentials.yml.enc. Okay, so this feature is provided since rails 5.2, so you can manage your environment variables or your configuration data inside this credentials file. And here you can also see that there is a key that is known as master.key. So this master.key is used to decrypt the environment variables mentioned inside this credential.yml.enc. Okay, so these variables are encoded right now, and you can decode this using master.key. If you do not have master.key, you need to generate the new master key, and you need to add the value again into your credential.yml. Okay, so first open the credentials that we have already in our rails application. Okay, so you need to run this command here. Let me first exit from the rails console, and let's run the clear command here. Clear the console, and now editor equal to SCBL vet, and then you can write bin rails credential edit. Okay, however this SCBL is optional. Okay, if you are following some other text editor, then you can use that text editor. I'm using the Sublime text editor, so I will go with the SUBL. Okay, if you, if it is if other text editor is your preference, then you can definitely type it here. Okay, and you can default go with the Nano or Vim editor as well, but to be honest, I'm not familiar with that, so I'm not using the Nano and Vim editor here. Okay, just a mistake I made here. Let me write a double quotes here. Okay, okay, now submit this. When you submit this, you can see that a credential.yml file has been opened to me. Here I can see that what variables I already have, that secret key base, this is for development environment. Okay, if you want to add for production environment, then you can add as well. And here you can see that there is a AWS data, sorry, there is AWS credential which are provided inside the name AWS with access key ID and secret access key. Okay, Here you can add another or any other kind of secret variables or configuration variable into this credential file. Okay, for example, let me add Google, sorry. Okay, and then into this Google, what keys I can provide? Let's say map API key, and let's provide any random value here. And then you can provide client secret, and this client secret could be anything, another random value, and then client ID, and this could be anything. Okay, now just save this file and close your credentials file. Okay, now if you look at your credentials.yml.enc, you can see that the size of the file has been changed. Now you can see more data in this file. Okay, now it's time to see how we can access this environment variables from credential.yml.enc. Okay, so let's open your Rails console. So open it, Rails console, or let's simply write. And here you can see all of your existing configuration using Rails dot application dot credentials dot config. Okay, sorry, yeah, config. When you submit this command, you can see that there are AWS key, there are Google variables, and there is a secret key based variable. Okay, now if you want to access, let's say, values of the Google, how you can do this? Let's say config, remove this config, and you write Google here, and here you can see map API key, client secret, and client ID. And if you want to access any one of these values, how you can do? Then map API key, and just to close this symbol, sorry. Now submit it. So here you can see the value of it. And there is another way of accessing this value as well. You can do it like, let's say, Google, sorry, credentials.dig, and here you can write Google and then map API key. And somehow if you forget this command, that how to use or how to access environment variable from the credentials.yml, then you can do this using like open your storage.yml, and here you can see the example of accessing this. Here you can see that it is accessing the access key id, and you can see here rails.application.credentials.date, and then aws access key id, and then okay, so this is the way. So let's take a look again at how we have access from the credential.yml.enc. Okay, so to see all the variables, you need to run rails.application.credential.config, and to see the keys of specific data like rails.application.credential.google. Okay, so now you will see all the keys for the Google, and similarly you can do this for AWS and for any category that you have managed or configured inside your credential.yml.enc. Okay, but you need to make sure that configuration of environment variables from your credential.yml.enc only works if you have a valid master.key in your config directory. Both the credential.yml.enc and the master.key is generated when you first generate the new Rails application. Okay, and this facility to manage environment variables using credential.yml.enc is only supported by Rails 5.2 or higher versions. Okay, and here you also need to keep one thing in mind, that you can push your credential.yml.enc along with your code, but you have to add master.key into .gitignore. Okay, and by default it will be added there already, and you can check it here, like open the gitignore file. Okay, and you will find that master.key is already added here. Let's search for the, okay, so you can see that ignore master key of decrypting credentials and more, so it is already here, added here, config then master.key. Here you need to keep one thing in mind, that whatever the ways you are using to manage your environment variables, restart your Rails server or console if you are changing the value of existing variables, removing existing variables or adding new variables. Else you will cannot see the effect of this and you will get the nil value, and sometimes you might get the runtime error as well. Okay. So this is how we can manage environment variables in a Rails application. I hope this lecture helps you in understanding the concept of environment variables and how to manage them in your app. Okay, so try all these three ways. Okay, and then decide whatever is best for you and go with that. But in my opinion, you must have idea of all of these ways, like using .env figaro gem and credential.yml.enc file as well. Okay, because you don't know that on what project, suppose if you are working as a developer in some organization or as a freelancer, or you are working for some client, then you don't know that on what kind of project you have to deal with which way. Okay, because some clients prefer .env gem, some clients prefer figaro gem, some clients prefer credential.yml.enc way to handle the environment variables. Okay, so in that case you must be familiar with all of these. However, these all these things are very similar, a very simple and very easy steps, so you can learn whenever you want. Okay, but it would be better if you can have basic idea before you will face this on real project. Okay, so that's all from this lecture, and thanks for watching this, and let's meet into another lecture with another exciting topic. Till then, tata, goodbye, take care, and stay safe.